So, negative programs and self-sabotage. When it comes to self-sabotage, this is a more familiar term to most of you. You know that is a big productivity buster, goal buster, so to say. Negative programs is a term not very many people are familiar with, but today we're going to bring both of them together. And you are going to see how the reason for self-sabotage is those negative programs that you are not aware of in many instances. And we're going to also talk about why this is happening and what you can do about it. So basically, our topic today is to solve the problem of why you cannot accomplish something when you really want to accomplish it, and you have all the tools and all the necessary stuff, so to say, that you need in order for this to happen, and no logical reason of why you shouldn't be able to do this, and yet you can't do it. So basically, you want to do something, you have everything you need, but for some reason you can't do that. For example, it's a common thing in relationship. You have always been dreaming of forming a very functional relationship with a person who's got X, Y, and Z qualities. He's got to be cute, he's got to have money or whatever. And all of a sudden you run into this specific person. He's got all the qualities you've been looking for. He even acts interested. He even makes steps to invite you on a date or get to know you better. And you just can't bring yourself either to go out with him or to keep a conversation or act natural. It's just like a stone wall. You cannot form that relationship. On the business side of things, this happens more often than not to a lot of people, is that you have this good idea that you think is going to fly. You're convinced it's going to fly, as a matter of fact. You have even read all the background materials. You've educated yourself on how business works. You know exactly what you got to do. And you're not doing it. You just wake up in the morning, you have your list of things that you got to do about it. You even have the time. And then instead of working on your business, you end up doing dishes or mowing the lawn or barbecuing ribs with the in-laws. It's just like a block that stands in your way that you cannot do this. Or, for example, you really want to create a career doing something. You want to be an airline pilot or a model or whatever. You start going to college, you start making steps towards accomplishing it, and all of a sudden you just can't find yourself to be able to go any further. And the interesting part is that it's not that you ran out of money and had to quit college because of that. It's not because you got married and you're too busy to do it. Or you didn't lose interest either. You still want to be that airline pilot or that successful model. You just can't go any further. You can't explain this. So this is what we're going to talk about today. It will also cover, for those of you who are in the Unfug group, last week you guys did the Wheel of Life exercise, and I asked you to watch for patterns of when something negative happens to you on a regular basis. We've discussed that when something happens to prevent you from doing X, it's not really bad necessarily. You know, things do happen in life. We're all human. We can't be everywhere. So it's perfectly okay if something came up and you can't accomplish a particular task or a particular thing that you've planned for yourself. But if every time you plan something, you end up not accomplishing it, then it's a pattern. and that's something to be looked deeper into. So when we talk about self-sabotage today, we are also going to talk about those particular patterns, instances, whatever you want to call them, of when on a regular basis you come to a hard stop when you start doing a one particular thing that you can isolate, and it's a pattern every time you're trying to do this. So self-sabotage is the word that is used in our general language and conversation to describe those things. And it's used in a meaning of just not knowing a reason for why you cannot do this. If we know a reason of why we're not accomplishing something, we use that reason and say, hey, I started a diet and I'm not following it because I don't like the foods, or because my cravings are so hard nor so strong that I'm not able to deal with them. So that's why I cheat on my diet. But if we can't find a reason of why we're doing this, then we call this self-sabotage. For example, using that same example of diet, if I start a diet and I'm following through, I'm being successful, I'm getting somewhere, I've lost some weight, on a particular night, I'm not hungry, I'm not craving anything in particular to where it's like, I gotta have it or I'm gonna die. Something may sound good, but nothing to rise to the level of craving. And for some undefinable reason, I decide to go out and have pie and ice cream at 9 p.m., knowing darn well that that's the time when you're not supposed to eat anything. And I go ahead and do that. Why? There is no logical reason. I'm not craving anything. I'm not hungry. Nobody's pressuring me to go. I just do it. So that's what we call self-sabotage, because we cannot pinpoint a reason of why I'm doing that. If we can, like even with that same diet, for instance, I join the gym and I go a couple times, and then I'd say, well, maybe not today. Tomorrow will be a better day. And then tomorrow comes and I'm not going again because I find another excuse. People would call this self-sabotage, which is really not a good term because they would use it alongside with, oh, you're being lazy. Well, if you know yourself to not be a lazy person, if you're not lazy when it comes to anything else, like your work or you're taking care of your family or helping a friend out, or, getting up in the middle of the night because somebody called and they need your help. So if you're not lazy in general, you're probably not lazy when it comes to going to the gym either. And of course, in my weight loss group that I teach, we go in a lot more detail of what's actually driving that. But for our purposes here is just, it's a BS reason that's attached to this particular concept. And this is why we also use self-sabotage right alongside with it, because it's really not that reason, and deep down inside we know it. We don't know the reason, and so we label it as self-sabotage. So that is what we are going to focus on today, is how do we bust through those walls and those roadblocks that we cannot explain. If I can explain, if I have a reason, then I'm going to deal with that particular obstacle and I'm done. If I'm not going to the gym simply because I am lazy, then, maybe that's what I need to work on. But if I know I'm not, then I should be looking for a reason of why this is happening. If I am dropping out of college because I don't have money, then, well, I need to work on sources of income so that I can afford college, and I'm going to continue. But if I'm dropping out for no reason that I myself can even define, what do I do about that? I still want to get somewhere. I still want that career. Part of me wants it. The other part, is dragging me back. What is this? So when we cannot define a logical reason, when we can't pinpoint it logically, rationally, where do we gotta look? If our mind and our rational intellect is not being able to help us out, to reason out as to why this is happening, where do we need to look? And in that case, we need to look in our subconsciousness. It's a subconscious reason, subconscious hurdle. And this is where those negative programs come in. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to use terminology, just like negative programs, that you guys may not be very familiar with. And that is being used in mind control techniques, and even in Satan worship, they use some of the terminology that I use sometimes, maybe not so much as negative programs, but egregore is a big one that they basically have stolen and they're using it. But don't let that scare you. If you have heard a term that I'm using in some kind of nasty context like this, like I said, don't let that alarm you, because it's not that the term is bad or associated with that, but it's basically been stolen by those people. So kind of like a knife in the hands of a surgeon, it's a useful tool. In the hands of a robber, it can be a tool for evil. And same goes with those terms and the concepts that they describe. They've been hijacked by people who use it for evil purposes, like mind control or other things. And why? Because these concepts are part of our reality, and the terms are there to describe them. And these parts of our reality work alongside with other parts of reality, and they have their function and place, and they fall into the chain of things to have their place and to trigger the events that they're meant to trigger. But people who use them in mind control techniques have a very valid reason to be aware of that reality, because they use it to their advantage. And I think it's high time when normal people like you and I became aware of these parts of reality, became aware of these concepts, so that we are not as easily manipulated. Because if we know what is going on in our mind, if we know how those things work, then it's a lot harder for somebody to use these techniques against us. We are more in control of what we do and how we interact with reality around us, so that reality doesn't come running us over. And again, we can also use them in a positive sense to determine where the roadblocks come from and determine what the obstacles are that stand in our way and deal with them successfully. So in today's discussion, I've already introduced the term, the concept of negative programs. Another concept I'm going to introduce is memes. And that's what you see above me here. That's a very, what they say, vernacular, common language, common definition of a meme is what's behind me. Well, of course, that's what a meme is. But that's not where the term originated. And I'm going to explain a little bit about that. You're probably like, why are we talking about memes? That's because that's what everybody knows memes as. It's a picture, funny picture with some words. But the term was coined by Richard Brody, who, interestingly enough, is a computer guy, and he was working for Microsoft at the time when he coined the term, which was 1996. And if you're old enough as me, and you've been around for a while, then you will remember that in 1996, these little pictures with words in them did not exist yet. Facebook, I don't remember if it was around in 1996. If it was, nobody knew it was there. It wasn't popular yet. And, social media, I think, came in, later, maybe, sometime, 2000-ish, millennial time. But in 1996, those memes weren't there. And Richard Brody came up with that concept as he was working for Microsoft, and I think he was leaving that field at that point and branching more into psychology. And he has made a very interesting observation, is that just like viruses in natural life, there are viruses in the computer, and there can be viruses in our mind as well, in our psychological part. And so he wrote this book called Viruses of the Mind, where he introduced this concept of a meme. And the concept of meme is taken from the word gene, as in genetics. He just replaced the first letter G with a letter M and called it meme, because he said that just like our physical being consists of different genes, different cells that taken together creates what we are, in the same manner, our psyche, our psychological part, consists of different parts, different particles that taken together comprise the big picture of what we think, who we are, how we perceive reality, what we are psychologically. And he called them memes to draw the parallel with genes. And so when he is talking about viruses of the mind, he drew this parallel that just like in genetics, in physical genetics, a gene is a carrier of certain information for our body to take into consideration and act accordingly, so to say. In the same manner, in the computer, a virus is a piece of program that carries certain information that is going to be, passed into the computer and do its dirty work in those cases when there is a computer virus. So in the same manner, a meme is a piece of information that is passed on to us, and it produces its certain effect. So a meme, as we know it today, is more than just words or more than just a picture. It communicates a certain feeling, a certain emotion, a certain concept, even a certain school of thought or philosophy or a certain feeling, a certain attitude, which is a lot more than what the words say, or a lot more than what the picture shows. But that particular combination creates this unit of information that, like I said, carries a lot more meaning than the sum of its parts. Now, a virus is something that I'd like to discuss a little more in a little more detail here, because a lot of people confuse a virus with a bacteria. They think it's some kind of bug. It's like a very small microscopic bug that, lives out there and infects people, which is incorrect. And when I say that, people are like, what? Where'd you come up with this concept? Google it. Google, see what a virus is. A virus is not a bug. It's a chunk of DNA. That's all it is. It's a part of genetic code that is independent and it travels out there. And when it comes to our body, just like any part of genetic code, it communicates certain information and makes our body do things or react in a certain way. Like, for instance, you get a cold virus, it's going to produce the reaction of runny nose, headache, and whatever else is associated with it. If it's stomach flu virus, you know what happens. You're not going to know which end of your body to turn to the toilet. So that's what a virus is. It's a chunk of DNA that carries certain information that it passes on to our body that makes our body respond and react accordingly. So when it comes to a computer virus, it acts in the same manner. It's a chunk of a program that comes in and carries certain information, which makes the computer do certain things, whatever the creator of the virus has programmed it to do. So this is how viruses work. And by that analogy, the mental virus, or as Richard Brody defined it as a virus of the mind, is the same thing. It's a meme. It's a unit of information, a unit of code, so to say, that comes into our mind and produces a certain effect. So like, when we see a funny meme, we laugh, or it's a demotivator, we kind of like, yeah, that's true. So we react in a certain way, or, it's a piece of information that we take on and consider. And it's like, well, that's true. Like, for instance, here, some people just need a high five in the face with a hammer. It's like, yeah, right. Some people do. I'm going to adopt this philosophy. So now that meme has just entered my mind, and it produced its effect for me saying, you know what? No more nice guy. I think that's true. I think I'm being taken advantage of way too much because I'm way too nice of a person. And with some people, that just isn't going to work. So this thought has been planted in my mind, and it is producing a certain reaction, a certain, behavior, or a certain attitude, how long lasting it's going to be, remains to be seen, and obviously depends on a lot of things. But I'm just giving it to you as an example to illustrate how those things work. So viruses also have this ability to make copies of themselves. I can liken them to, in the olden days, in the typography, they had a typeset. So, they put letters on a, like on a board or wherever they type those things, and then you just lay a piece of paper and it makes copies, as many as you print off, before they came up with digital printing. And or you can probably liken it to a rubber stamp. Again, it's a raised pattern that you ink, and then you can stamp as many copies as you want. So a virus is kind of the same way. There is a certain pattern, and then it just prints more and more copies of itself, and then those copies start printing copies, and that's how it multiplies. So this is another quality of the virus that all three have in common, physical virus, computer virus, and mental virus, is that they're able to make copies of themselves. And so that is something that we're going to talk about here shortly, once we get to that concept. So we get those memes passed on to us from many different directions. And some of them are positive and some are good. When we learn how to walk and how to talk and how to function in this life, we're basically picking up the little units of information from our parents as we're growing up, and they're very useful. Some that are passed on to us are not. And that's what Richard Brody calls viruses of the mind. So these are parts of the program that are not beneficial. And he gives, different categories of, the memes, that have to do with, with your perception of reality. There, they could be judgments, distinctions, what is similar, what is different, and so on. But we're not going to talk about memes in general here because, again, we have a goal here today is to solve the issue of self-sabotage and why we do things like that to ourselves and what to do about it. So we are only going to talk about negative memes, negative programs, and those can be divided into two major categories. Don't be and don't be yourself. Again, those of you who are who are part of my unplug group, we are going to talk about this in a lot more details. If you're watching or listening elsewhere, then just stay tuned. I will post more information about this as we go along. But for the purpose of our today's discussion, just remember that those negative viruses, negative memes, negative programs are divided into two categories: don't be and don't be yourself. Just because it's a negative program that falls into that category doesn't mean it's really dangerous. It can be pretty harmless, but it may not. Kind of like viruses, some viruses give you a runny nose, and some viruses will kill you. So it's kind of the same way, except, even doesn't rise to the level of a runny nose in terms of the impact. So let's take an example. So for instance, a mother is telling a child, it's cold outside, put on a coat. Pretty innocent, right? But if you look deeper into this, is the meme that's being passed down falls into the category of don't be yourself. Basically, I don't care how you feel. I don't care if you think you're hot or cold. I'm telling you to put on a coat regardless of how I feel, because I think you should. So that is a definition of a don't be yourself mental program. And when I bring it up, most people kind of go, huh, what? So it's wrong to tell your child to put on a coat? No, it's not. I mean, like I was mentioning earlier, some of those negative programs are pretty harmless. In fact, if you learn to put on a coat every time you go outside, it may save you from catching a cold later in life it's really, it could even be beneficial in that sense. Well, if it's not beneficial, it's definitely harmless in this setting. But if you consider the negative program part of it, in an ideal world, a mother would go to a child, feel their nose, like, is your nose cold? Or feel their hands. Are your hands cold? Oh, your hands are cold, your nose are cold. You should put on a coat so that you don't get sick. In that particular setting, we're taking into consideration how the person feels, what the real situation is, and giving a constructive advice based on that. If I don't do that and I just tell you to put a coat because I think you should, that's slightly different. And you guys can see how subtle that difference is. But sorry, and this is why, I would say, by my guesstimation, 70% of parents wouldn't even stop to think, and they just, that's what they do, and no big deal, right? So like I said, in an ideal world, that's how we should do it, but who does it? A lot of people don't. And just by itself, that particular, incident is harmless. But just like any virus, like I said, they multiply. And a virus like that communicates a subconscious message that it's okay to tell somebody what to do, regardless of what their will, desire, and situation is. I can tell you what you should do just because I think that you should do that. And when those viruses compound, like if we have a very controlling parent that always just tells the child what to do and has absolutely no regard to how the child feels, then we look at people who've been raised by overly controlling and overly demanding parents, and those people have problems. They admit they have problems. From the standpoint of psychology, they have problems sometimes to the point of trauma, if those things compound. Another negative effect of that is that if I'm being raised by a parent who told me, put on a coat, never asked me if I was cold or not, then to me that's normal. Like I was talking earlier, we don't even question things like that. They're too small to even, process on a rational, conscious level. So this is how I'm going to raise my children. I'm just going to tell them, hey, put on a coat. When I look outside and I see it's cloudy, put on a coat. But if I was raised by a mother who always felt my nose and, asked me, hey, honey, are you cold? How are you feeling? Then that's what got imprinted in my mind. This is what I'm going to pass down to my kids, because if that's how I was raised, that is going to be my reaction. Hey, are you cold? How do you feel? So this is how those things compound, because if it's just, a code thing, figuratively speaking, in my case, and I get married to somebody who has been raised by a more demanding parent, and they think it's okay to tell the child when to get up, when to go to bed, when not to go to bed, what, what to do, what not to do, and, in every, little occasion. Again, I'm not saying that it's wrong to tell your children what are the right things to do. I'm just saying that when it's done with no regard of the benefit to that person, immediate benefit to that person, but just because the parent thinks that that's the way to do it, then that's when it becomes a problem. If you got to go to bed, before 10, okay, that's advisable because you're going to get some sleep. But if our rule is that you're in bed by 10 p.m. and if you don't, consequence is going to result, even if you've got homework to do and you want to make an exception, that becomes different. So anyway, so if I get married to somebody who have been raised by a demanding parent, then, we're going to jive. It's just a code. In my case, hey, put on a code. In his case, don't brush your teeth tonight, or, we have a hard stop at 10 o'clock or whatever it is. And those things going to compound. And they're going to make copies of themselves because now this setting is normal, and other memes that fall into the same category are going to be welcome. And this is how a negative program is formed. So don't be yourself. So this is an innocent example. A little slightly less innocent, still pretty harmless, but, still, a little more, more noticeable effect is, for instance, I think it's Hamilton. I can't remember the brand name, but that appliance brand, their tagline is good thinking. It's on all their boxes, it's in their advertisement, and so Hamilton brand, good thinking. And if you ever bought one of those, that's the cheapest, junkiest appliance you can find. They're made very cheaply. They usually have about half the watts of like KitchenAid or good appliances, if you check the specs. They're made of thinner plastic. They break like you wouldn't believe. Because they don't have enough watts, they have less power. So if it's a blender, it's going to get stuck every time. If it's a coffee pot, it's not going to get hot enough. So it's anything but good thinking to get a Hamilton appliance. But it's, and I don't know if it's a Hamilton, but names have been changed to protect the guilty, even, so we can keep it at that. They have this, that's their meme, right? Good thinking, because that's what they advertise as. That's being put in our mind when we see a box, which the meme, the program here is good thinking. So you want to be good thinking in our definition of it. Don't be yourself. Don't be what you are. Be what we want you to be. A person who's good thinking equals buying a Hamilton appliance. So what what happens on the surface of this kind of deep subconscious deep analysis of the subconsciousness, what happens on the surface is that when we go to the store and we see the box and it says good thinking, without we don't go through all this analysis, obviously, every time we look at a box. So the meme that is immediately communicated to us, it's a good appliance. It's good thinking to get this appliance. We don't look at the specs. We don't compare the watts of it to others. We buy it. Mission accomplished, right? But the negative meme here is don't be thinking, don't be checking the comparisons, don't be questioning, don't be the person you are, be what we want you to be. And of course, if we take a more sinister application of, like I was saying, from mind control techniques, if you tell a person, hey, you have a very rare illness and you're going to die within the next 5 years, the only way you can extend your lifespan is never get exposed to sunlight, for instance, or drink blood or whatever you wish. And so that would be a very powerful meme, negative program passed onto a person, because who in their right mind would drink blood or not be anywhere during daylight, put dark curtains and hide in the basement and only come out at night? Without it, it's very altering to a person's behavior. And just like a virus needs a good environment, needs the right environment, I should say, to enter our body and start doing its work. Um, these viruses also need the right environment for that to happen. So like, for cold virus, if your immunity is down, if you're already cold, you just got caught in a monsoon, you're wet, the wind is blowing, your immunity is down because of that, you're more likely to catch a cold than if you've just exercised and if you're in great physical shape and you just drank some, superfood cocktail with ginger, you're probably not going to catch a virus, even if it's there, even if everybody around you is sneezing. But, if your immunity is compromised, then, you're more likely to. So with mental viruses, is the same way. Circumstances need to exist to be conducive to catching that virus, which in this case is a position of authority. So if your mom tells you to put on a coat, it's likely to come in your mind and stay in your young age when you see your mom as absolute authority. And same thing, if I tell you, hey, you're terminally ill and you got to drink blood in order to survive, you're probably going to go, you know what, get lost. But if your doctor tells you that, then you're a lot more likely to catch that virus. This is just a parenthetical remark to help you guys understand how those things work and to prevent questions, reaction like, so does everything I hear is going to live in my mind and create havoc? No, I'm just using, those extreme even examples here to illustrate how it works. But let's get back to self-sabotage and how those negative programs created. Again, for those of you who are in the group, next week we are going to do a test to determine what those bits of information, what those memes in our subconsciousness, what they are in each individual case, and dig down and determine them in each individual case. Because when it comes to things like, well, why can't I get started, or why I'm always late, it's kind of difficult to pinpoint what exact specific meme is causing that. But for the rest of you here, I just want you to take that approach of taking a good look of what thoughts, beliefs, and perceptions are mine, and which ones are the don't be or don't be yourself ones. To give you an example, for example, if say this gentleman, this guy is raised by a father who is an attorney, who wants him to continue the family legacy, and who has always been saying that being an attorney is excellent money, is prestige, is everything what our family is, as compared to some janitor out there who may not have the same ethical beliefs or issues or ethical identity. Therefore, you need to be a lawyer. So if this is the meme that is being passed to this guy, and let's say he wants to be a rock star, he wants to go write music, and so he goes to write music, or let's take something less extreme. Let's say he wants to be a painter, he's a creative type and he wants to be this outstanding graphic designer, and so he's gonna go to school and he's gonna learn to be a graphic designer. No matter how hard he, how much he wants to be a graphic designer and how hard he works to become a graphic designer, that meme in his subconsciousness that this is not the right thing to do, this is not going to continue family legacy, this is going to disappoint your dad, this is not how things are done, even if he's not thinking about that, this program is in his subconsciousness that is always going to hold him back. with every step of the way that he takes towards, accomplishing his graphic design career dream. Or if he even decides to not pursue graphic design, he decides that, well, I got to honor my father and that I would continue family legacy. I'm not into law. I think it's boring. I hate reading long, dry texts, but this is the right thing to do and I'm going to do it. So he does that. Well, now that's not him. He's got a creative nature. He's got a creative mind. The analytical, detail-oriented part is not him. And he tries to pursue a career in law. Now he lacks that natural ability to see all the minute details and the patience to look into that and the memory to memorize different languages of the law. He cannot compete with those people who are detail oriented and to whom it's a sheer pleasure. So he is always going to be behind. No matter how hard he tries to reach that career goal, he was always going to feel inferior because he's going to be looking around and see people who are doing a lot better. So this is how those roadblocks are formed. And so this is one of the instances when a person would be asking a question. It's like, no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, I cannot be successful as a lawyer. Or even on the flip side is that I just feel some kind of roadblocks to becoming a successful graphic designer. What are they? So the answer would be this particular negative program that's been put in his mind that is stopping him. And the only solution to that would be to find out, hey, that's what it is. That's what's holding me back. So in the case of him pursuing a graphic designer career, is basically say, I'm doing this for my dad. And maybe the solution is to sit down and tell my dad is that it's only right for him to let me pursue my passion, and I will still support and uphold family legacy, and we're not going to make any less money. And if it's B, if he is in the law field, then that's probably a good reason to stop and not try to push it any further, because it's not the right field for him. And have, again, I might need to have a conversation. Or, let's say another example along those lines to help you understand it better. Let's say if you are raised by a parent who is very frugal and who always talks about how there is not enough money and how dangerous it would be to lose your job or to have a job that doesn't pay enough, and all the stress and all the negative things associated with that. So if that's how you were raised, and all of a sudden you want to quit your job that is more or less secure and start your own business because you think, hey, I'm going to make a lot more money if I go start my own business. I'm sick of this 9 to 5. I'm sick of the, dictatorship of the boss. I want to be my own boss, and I know I'm going to make enough money because I've got this wonderful idea and I have read all the books. I've done my research. I know it's going to work. But if you've been raised by a parent like this, the idea of what is going to happen if I don't have the security of the job, how devastating it's going to be if I'm not making enough money, even initially when I start that, is always going to be holding you back. That fear is going to keep you from making that step and starting to pursue that. Again, so this is a negative program that has been put there, not deliberately, but through circumstances that existed, that is standing in your way like a concrete wall that is preventing you from making that step. Versus someone who never had this kind of issue wouldn't, in the first place, may not even think about that. So what, I'm frying burgers at McDonald's, and I'm going to stop doing that, and I'm going to start my own business. So, I'm going to go with no paycheck for 2 months. I don't care. So what, I'll be behind on some bills. I'll catch up later, or I can't afford, certain things. I'm okay without them for a while, no big deal. And I'm sure a lot of people who live like that 24/7, 365 days a year. That's their pattern, and they survive, and it doesn't bother them. But if you have that mindset that you have to have enough of steady income, that is going to be a big deal for you. And so the fear is, in a sense, substantiated. But the way to deal with that is to have a powwow with yourself and say, hey, okay, so I'm afraid of being tight for a couple months. What can I do? Do I have the option to get another job in the event that despite all calculation, it fails? Yes, there's a lot of places hiring, so that is an option. So what am I afraid of? Am I afraid of not making enough money to pay the bills? Well, that's a legitimate fear, but is there any way I can save up and make myself a cushion for next couple months to kind of ease the fear? Once you confront the fear, then you can deal with it, and you can make adjustments, make plans, or you can just tell the fear is like, what? I don't care. That's just that fear. It's not me. It's a program that's been passed down to me from someone else. Away with it. I am a free spirit person, and me, my true self, I don't care if I go without for a couple of months. No big deal. And then you deal with it that way. Or even just the realization is that, hey, this particular field and career sounds appealing to me, but what is stopping me and preventing me is a negative program that's been passed down to me. And it all boils down to the fear that I'm not going to make enough money at it. Is that a legitimate reason to quit? Or maybe I can research and see how people make money in that particular profession. Are there some that make more than others? Is it only, the people who don't do it right that don't make enough money? Kind of like, selling coffee, you can sell a coffee at a lemonade stand, or you can be Starbucks. There's a wide range of, doing the same thing, just different ways. And so self-analysis and like being honest with yourself, and then thinking those things through. So in terms of again, in terms of those people in my audience who are not in the unfug group, so that is pretty much the scope of the advice. So number one, obviously, even being aware of the negative programs, and that's how a lot of times our opinions and drives are formed, is going to be helpful, because that gives you a tool to question what is going on, and a tool to analyze things a little deeper. Then again, keep working on self-improvement, keep working on self-knowledge, on emotional intelligence, so that you can think these things through, and try to dig a little deeper, and think deeper, and see what are the things that stand behind my indecisions, or what things could potentially stand behind my roadblocks. You can follow me. I'm going to post more on that. Of course, it's going to come through, and you're going to learn more. But If you feel that, well, gee, it's still, kind of like very hazy, I mean, I can think all I want about, what may be preventing me, but I still, can't think of something that is preventing me. In the Unfog program, which by the way, you can join for $1, we can have a lot more in-depth discussion about those things. I have live Zooms where you can come out and have questions. But more importantly, there are tests that a person can take that help you think through things and then work through things. So it's a psychological test that reveals those subconscious mental viruses, using Richard Brody's term. And of course, there are ways of dealing with them specifically, depending on what they are. Once you uncover them, then there are also ways of dealing with them. Because again, like I said, earlier, it's pretty straightforward when you can pinpoint a fear that is preventing you, or you've been raised by a controlling parent, and it's kind of obvious. Or you look back and I say, yeah, my parent always told me X, and I know that X is totally not me. For instance, it's wrong to, I can't think of a good example um, of making, it's wrong to make too much money. It's greed, for instance, and that's the concept that's in your mind, and you're trying to start a business and make a lot of money. So yeah, that's going to keep you back. So things like that are a lot easier to pinpoint than things when it comes to why am I late all the time again? Or, why can't I stick with a task? Or why can't I form a relationship? And, if you're not finding any of the, big issues, then the test would be your way to go to uncover the small issues that may stand behind those things. So by all means, do stick with me. I will talk more about this if you still feel that, hey, I need more personalized, more in-depth approach. You also now know where to find it. I hope you guys enjoyed today's presentation, and the discussion will continue both here and in the Unfog group for you guys who've been watching this. We are going to discuss this in a lot more detail this week. Have a great day.